a motion to approve the minutes of October 1st.
Just give me a second. Time's up. I'm sorry, there's a section in there that needs some. Correct. Yeah, look, printed copy, handy.
Just hand this, the printed copy of the minutes. I believe that's all it is. All of them.
You know, there's a section here that just says motion to the floor to accept the policy, second by Christian. And then there's no action reported, so Hooper, we're going to share to come back in 6 months with an update, the employee retention option, there's nothing further to discuss at this time, let's discuss this as time for this discussion. I think it needs a little bit right in here, you know. Just that minutes should reflect actions, and there's just no action shown. So. You see it there?
They see the motion.
Yeah, but there's no recording of what happened. You know, was it approved? Or?
Motion denied for lack of a second.
No.
Okay, keep going down further.
Yeah.
Motion on the floor to accept the policy.
Yeah.
Second by, there was no vote.
Oh, we did.
We're here, there was no vote or anything.
But we did. It was passed.
Well, I understand, but
Can the minutes reflect on, do you see where I'm reading?
I think I found you.
Motion on the floor to accept the policy, second. And then,
I'll go back and look at my notes. I didn't bring my whole binder today.
but what we need is an amendment in the minutes that after motion on the floor, I'm sorry, after the second, that the motion was carried. Is that proper? Is that what you want, or what we
you
need?
should report something there. Okay.
And we can work out the verbiage, but just that, we're gonna put in that the motion was carried.
We make a motion
Yeah,
to
that's
accept with the amendment.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Go ahead.
I'll second.
I'm trying to let her catch up. Motion and second.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to, is he ready?
Yep.
We're going to jump around on the agenda a little bit and go down to the sheriff, is it 6B?
Correct.
For a presentation and some,
We have Dave Ellinger with us here to discuss the budget of jail revenues and expenses. We felt that he would be best suited to provide some feedback for you and provide some information rather than Scott and I trying to go through that. He's the expert in this area, and per Supervisor Guckenberger's request, he wanted some information specifically on the jail revenues and expenditures. So, Dave, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, well, unfortunately with the budget, I haven't had as much time as I would want to on this issue. I have started on it. Basically, Supervisor Guckenberger wishes to know the bed cost per inmate to verify that we are including the all appropriate costs for charging to the federal government. But what I have to do is basically break down the costs for variable costs versus fixed costs. When the jail was built 20, 25 years ago, whatever it was, we obviously overbuilt with the intention that we were going to house a substantial number of inmates. In rough numbers, we've got the 3/4 is federal inmates and 1/4 is county inmates. Well, those county inmates are the fixed costs. You know, we can't put that cost anywhere else. But then when you get into the federal and state inmates, what I call the variable costs or variable expenses, you're looking at wages and benefits, medical, and that's really it. Yes, you have a little bit of additional laundry expense, you have a little bit of additional utilities, water usage, that sort of thing, but it's not like the inmates can crank up the air conditioning or the heat in their individual cells or anything like that. So what I'm trying to do is that analysis, breaking down the cost per unit. I'm also intending to work on the equivalent of a break-even analysis, because when you look at the J-pot closure at the end of 2018, and I understand that there were safety issues for our employees, the building was getting older for maintenance, so just strictly looking at or taking those issues out of the mix, we lost about $2 million in revenue in subsequent years that we couldn't bill out to the federal government. But we also had savings of about $1.25 million of wages and benefits because of reduced staff or staff efficiencies, whatever you want to call it. So at the current numbers, for lack of a better terms, the federal inmates are gravy. But you're going to get to a certain point where if we drop out the federal inmates, it will start costing us money, and that's where the break-even analysis that I'm trying to do will hopefully get to that point where we're at. So I could start showing you numbers on the screen right now, but honestly, if they're incomplete and not verified, I don't want to put the numbers out because they could be inaccurate till I verified everything. So I apologize that the schedule hasn't allowed me to get my PowerPoint presentation, but that's a very high-level verbal narrative of what I'm anticipating my future PowerPoint to you will be. So I guess I'm going to open up the floor to you folks to see if you have any questions right now.
Hey, Dave, just one quick question, because when I look at the revenues in 17, which is just prior to closing of J-Bot, we had $7,091,000 in revenue. And as of last year, we had 5.5, so that's, like a $500,000 difference between what you said and what I see in the numbers. That's not a $2 million difference, that's, 500,000. Again, I guess I'll wait until I see the final numbers and such, but, I don't know what you're showing for revenues, or are you combining transportation revenues with boarding revenues?
I have got, in my calculation, I've got transportation revenues and boarding revenues because they're all federal inmates, because the transportation of inmates is primarily gasoline and wages and benefits. We already have the vehicle, of course, but looking at the numbers I've got right now, the 2017 revenue is 8.3 million, and the 29 revenue was 6 million.
29. What year, or 19, you mean? You said 29.
Yeah, 17 was the last
Full
full
year,
year of
yep.
federals, and that was 8.3. 18, we started phasing down J-Pod, and we had 7.7 million. So that's roughly 500, 600,000. And calendar year 19, which was the first full year after closure, we were at 6 million. That did jump up just a little bit to 6.2 in 2020.
Yep. Yeah, again with transportation included, right?
Correct.
Yep. So the fixed cost, the fact that we've got a building over there, that whole fixed cost is gonna be attributed to our requirements and
Correct.
just like the cars and everything else. Well, then why not the employees as well? Then when we have to have employees, why not the employees, why not all the expenses attributed to ours?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you, but that's the hard part, because it isn't a one-to-one correlation of inmates to employees. There's a 1-to-8 ratio or whatever the numbers are. And so then part of the analysis, and I have to work with the sheriff and chief deputy on this, is we need to get a average ratio for number of employees versus number of inmates. And I understand that each pod is different, and I'm just throwing out numbers. A pod may be 1 to 12, B pod may be 1 to 20, or whatever the numbers are, but I have to put an average in there. So yes, I agree with you that certain amount of wages in the calculations has to be a fixed cost, certain amount has to be a variable cost.
But I don't understand why we're gonna do that with one expense and not with like the building. Or a better example, like in the transportation, you're not gonna include the vehicle itself.
Okay.
So,
And yes, I get what you're saying, and just like in my PowerPoint presentation at County Board where I said you could pick a number that substantiates it, I'm gonna have lots of numbers. It won't just say, this is the only way to include these costs. I'm gonna have a full bore cost, everything. What is the average bed cost, including all expenses? Variable costs one way, variable costs another way. So, there's going to be, I'm anticipating 4 or 5 different ways that it's going to say what is the true cost. And then the other thing that you've got to consider is that the market rate that's allowed. I'm going from memory. I believe the statutory rate that the state of Wisconsin pays is $52.16, if I remember right, for a daily bed rate. When we are putting inmates, county inmates in the local counties, whether it's Washington, Green Lake, I believe we're paying $46 to $48. The federal government right now is paying it's $86, quite a bit above it. And so let's just say that we, and I'm throwing out numbers, go to $90 an hour or $90 a bed. They may start looking around and say, okay, I know it's harder, but we're going to put 10 inmates at this county, 20 inmates at that one, and so forth. You've also got the dynamic that right now there's not a lot of counties that are accepting federal inmates. My understanding is that Kenosha County, the sheriff there has decided to get out of it. My understanding is that the Illinois legislature has basically forced that the state of Illinois and the counties there can't do it. So in that respect, we've got somewhat of a captive market for the feds, but remember, they've got 50 states to choose from. I doubt they're going to do anything in Alaska or Hawaii, so-called the continental 48 states. That's 47 other places that they could look to do it. So going from memory again, if we did the full $112 a day or whatever it is for our daily costs, then the feds would probably say, we're not paying that, or we're going to go to Arkansas or whatever. So it just isn't, true numbers involved. And then one thing I forgot to mention, the feds are going to say, well, your daily cost rate includes staffing that we're already paying for, so they're going to want their revenues attached or subtracted from the expenditures to get their net costs. So there's a lot of different ways that we're going to be looking at it, and I understand we're going into negotiations in the next calendar year with them. So the more data that we can have available to counter any points, the better. But it's not just a true 100% of cost is going to be recaptured, because the market isn't going to allow that.
One point just to add to what Dave said there, the contract, for everybody's information, is not with immigration. It is with the U.S. Marshals Service. And the U.S. Marshals Service has half of the inmates in our facility. They're not all immigration. There are sheriff's offices around the state of Wisconsin, a number of them, Dane County, Waukesha, Milwaukee, Racine, a bunch of them that are housing the U.S. Marshal inmates. So while there's a captive audience there for immigration, there is not so much for U.S. Marshals, which accounts for half of that.
Thank you for that clarification. That makes another difference, So again, if Waukesha County, for instance, if they have the room, they'd love to take the inmates from the Marshal Service. So think of it this way: when we, being Dodge County, want to raise our rates or pay our employees, historically, just like every other county, we ask, what's the other counties doing around? And listservs go out. I don't know if Kim's in the audience, but I'm sure she gets listserv questions from her organization. I know Jim does. So the counties talk to each other, and as the sheriff pointed out, if you price yourself out of the marshals, somebody will pick it up.
All right, well, the story I get is that we're going to have to evaluate, or I'm going to have to look closer at the fixed costs, and then we're going to have to work on driving those fixed costs down. And what those fixed costs are going to cost us for the 25% county employees, because everything else is incremental by your statement. So, we need to drive our fixed costs down to that level that, let's say, Jefferson or Marathon County or all these other counties have for the number of prisoners or inmates that the county has to house, because everything else is incremental, you said. So I'll just go about this another way after I get a chance to look at your PowerPoint, and we can study the numbers a little bit different.
Well, and I understand where you're coming from, but
David,
basic.
if we have a building that houses 350 people and we only need 100, you can't say those 100 people have to support housing for 350. That's not incremental,
Supervisor Gluckenberg, I understand what you're saying, and what I'm saying is I will be giving an analysis in 4 or 5 different ways.
Sure.
What do you want to include as costs that we should be recouping? If you give me just 1 second to put in the Excel formula here.
While David's doing
Okay,
that,
so
Oh, go ahead, David.
If we're, for the sheriff's department for corrections, the expenses, high level, wages, benefits, operational costs, indirect cost allocation, capital, and transfers out. High level, those are your categories. And we can't do anything to change the indirect cost allocation. Capital for the 22 budget is $70,000. For the size of the operation, that's not large. Operational expenses, when I take out what I would call the variable costs of medical and dental and food, all other operational costs are $585,000. The largest portion of that is $182,000 for liability insurance. I get where you're coming from saying that you're going to look at the operational costs to see where the savings are. For the size of the sheriff's budget, that's not a lot that you can change. And I respect that you're going to try. I certainly would too, but when you start looking at the numbers, there's not a lot of flexibility in those operational costs. You're going to be provided with those numbers. I'm going to be giving them for 17 through 20 actual and 21 and 22 projected. You're welcome to play with any numbers you want. I congratulate you if you could find substantial savings in those operational costs, but I don't really see where a lot of that is going to be found.
Dave, if I could ask, when you're doing your analysis, we took a look at this several years ago when we were looking at JPOD, the analysis of us to other counties and the levy that their jail is on, or their operations are on their particular county. As I recall, every single one that we did, our levy was far below all of those other counties. And it would be really good to have you take a look at that as well and do that comparison. Because we're constantly compared to Jefferson, and Jefferson's levy is higher than what ours is overall for the operations. And I'd love to have that comparison by you.
Okay, and that should be easily pulled, because everybody's got their budgets online. I obviously have a little bit of advantage knowing exactly where to look for Jefferson County now. Do you want me to just do the neighboring counties, or are there any other counties that you want added?
Neighboring counties, or maybe counties with jails of similar size, maybe we could have two comparisons.
Well, actually, I'd like to see something that would be comparable to housing just the county inmates without all of the federal. So roughly, 130 capacity, not 350.
And I think you're gonna have to check with each of those counties to find out, because a lot of our neighboring counties have those similar sized counties with similar sized inmates are gonna have also federal inmates that they're also housing. Or other state contracts as well. I mean, this is a common practice that you'd have to somehow weed that out if you're gonna do a comparison apples to apples.
And I think we'd have the same problem in subtracting those costs out, because I know Jefferson uses a pod system. I have to assume that the pod system is rather normal for the industry for jails. So again, how do you separate out federal versus county inmates when they are mixed together?
I wanted to add too that if there is still a misconception by anyone out there that, say we were normally we had a capacity for 300 inmates and we were going to cut it down to 150, that then if we're cutting half the inmates, we should be able to cut half the expenses or even half the personnel, and that's just not true. You can't, there's not that correlation. You're still going to need more staff for a whole host of reasons, including different classifications for inmates. You got to keep certain inmates separate, so you need to keep certain pods open. You just they wouldn't be to capacity. So at some point, you just can't reduce staff anymore, which again, wages and benefits is 80 to 85% of our budget, so there's not that 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio or whatever there.
It would appear we're at an impasse, or we're done with questions.
Wait for Dave's spreadsheet.
And Dave, you're going to, this is Tom, you're going to come back with us with that spreadsheet after you have time to complete it?
Both the spreadsheet and a PowerPoint. Some people do better with spreadsheets, some people do better with graphics. So try and not tailor it for one specific person. Supervisor Guckenberger, I know that you are a numbers person. You're going to be given the raw data in addition to everything else.
Thank you. Thank you. The simpler the better for me, I'm not an accountant.
I like to think that I do well to translate from accounting into English.
Excellent. Any other questions while Dave's still here?
While he's here, I do have a question, not so much on this portion of the budgeting for jail revenues and expenditures, but I think since we're all here and we have our budget meeting on Tuesday, there has been a lot of chatter. I've received emails, I've had phone calls, and even from the media, I've gotten phone calls about what the plans are for Tuesday, and I'm hoping that Supervisor Guckenberger can provide some clarity, because there's a lot of conjecture out there about what kind of budget amendment we might be looking for regarding the revenues. And so some people have said that there's going to be a cut of expenditures, some see an increase in revenue. So I'm just looking for some clarity so we have some kind of an idea.
Yeah, I did make a public statement, last Tuesday, right? And I said I intend to reduce revenue number in the budget by 400,000.
Reduce
So,
revenue?
correct. And then, no, excuse me, let me get that right. We're going to change the anticipated revenue for jail from the 5.072 to 5.472, and then on a similar cut then from the levy support. Is that correct, David? I mean, I reviewed it with you, I know.
Yes, what that would do is increase sheriff department revenues by 400, decrease sheriff property tax levy by 400, and then you, at least at that time, had commented that you wanted to increase the property tax levy by 100 for the hazmat truck, to bring it up to 300, and then the other 300 increase to property tax levy. You were considering options about what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think we're kind of waiting for a list of department level cuts, so we can determine where we might be able to put that money best. But, as far as the discussion here today, it's just the 400,000. And, just looking at the actual revenues for the last 3 years, there's no justification, in my opinion, to estimate revenues at 5.072 when revenues have been basically about 5.4 for the last 3 years. That's, after the JPOD closing. So why we underestimate revenues, I don't understand that. So
I'd love to provide some explanation for you.
well, let me say it this way: if Astico Park tells me that revenues for campground rental is down, or going to be down next year, I could understand that if we're going to close a section of the park or the campground. But logic tells me that people are going to be doing the same thing they've always been doing for the last 3 years. So if the last 3 years we've had 5.4 million in revenue, I would expect we would have 5.4 million in revenue.
But you didn't ask me.
I don't need to ask you, Dale, I've got,
I have some explanation for that. Can I provide the
sure,
explanation?
sure.
The explanation for it is, to start with, I don't know what's going to happen with HPOD in the beginning of the year. My target is to open it in mid-January. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I don't know if I'm going to be able to open it in January, February, or March, depending on staffing. If that happens, that means that revenue is going to be lower. There is no doubt about it. That revenue is going to be lower.
But
And so I at this point, I would rather be conservative in my budgeting to make sure that at the end of the year, we don't come up short, because we know there is potentially a problem. In addition to that, the federal government is in a state of disarray, and I think everybody knows that. We don't know what's going to happen regarding these inmate revenues, and that is my concern each and every year when I'm putting together that budget. I don't know what's going to happen based on the administrations that are there and what's going to happen. ICE changes their standards, ICE changes things all the time. What I don't want to happen is to budget to the max of those revenues, and then I come in below that, and now I have to explain to you, and I'll be chastised as to why I budgeted so high in the revenues. So if you want to increase that revenue from the county board perspective, I'm absolutely fine with that.
thank
You
you.
have that prerogative to do that. I wanted to provide you with the insight as to why I think that might be risky. And I want to make sure that we're doing conservative budgeting so that I would much rather provide a return to the budget at the end of the year than to come to you late at the end of the year and say, we came up short.
And that approach that you're taking does nothing for the rest of the county. It certainly solved your problem. Now, my answer to your answer is, with HPOD closed, you've told us that you're not going to have an impact on this year's budget.
Correct.
Okay, you were able to implement cuts to handle that. So I would presume that you'd be able to do the same thing next year. If HPOD stays closed, you should be able to maintain those same cuts that you've made so that we don't go over budget.
It's different. No, let me explain why it's different. Don't laugh at me. Let me explain why it's different. It's different because I need to train people. I may have people on staff that are going through training that I can't assign to those pods individually during those first 2-3 months. That means I'm going to have those expenditures, and I'm not going to be able to say that I don't have, or right now, I don't have those people working. I may have those people working in January. I just can't put them by themselves because of the training program to work in a pod, because that would be unsafe to do so. So there may be additional expenditures next year that I don't have right now.
I don't understand what those expenditures are.
Wages.
HPOD is closed right now.
Wages,
Wages for what?
employees,
For what? For HPOD?
yes.
But if HPOD is open and you have the wages, you also have the accompanying revenue, correct?
I can't just hire people and open HPOD. I have to train them first. They have to be educated on how to run the facility before I can open HPOD. They have to be trained, and that is a 3 to 4 month process. So there will be wages there in the beginning of the year that are not there now if I hire new employees.
And you won't be able to collect money for those people until after they're trained.
Correct. I won't be able
So
to.
there's 3-4 months we're employing people that the federal government's not gonna pay for.
I'm not going to be able to bring in the additional
So
revenue.
there's so much to analyze here, like,
Well,
you
that's
know,
why
the
you
overtime.
can't just
no,
do one
but the
motion that
overtime
says
and everything else,
400,000.
but do we not generate 5.4 million? If there is an underlying reason, then it makes sense. I don't see the underlying reason. That's why I'm coming forward with this proposed amendment.
I think Dale just explained the underlying reason.
And he also explained that, you know, he's able to generate savings so that it doesn't impact his budget. That's what he said. I mean, that's where we're aiming at the end of this year, correct?
That's if he doesn't open HPOD at all.
If he doesn't close, if
So
HPOD
you want
doesn't open up,
to collect revenue for something we're not doing. That's the only way you're gonna make it come out.
I don't understand your statement.
HPOD cannot be open for 3-4 months because we have to train people. But you wanna add that revenue in there or subtract revenue when we can't bill anybody?
Well, without knowing what vacancies currently exist, let me ask you something, Dale. Any truth to the rumor that you take people from patrol and put them in the jail to handle absences or?
It's not a rumor, we're using some big patrol staff to assist with overtime vacancies. When our staff are being ordered in the jail, patrol who have worked in the jail in the past are being allowed to go in and assist in filling those spots. So we're not running our employees ragged.
Okay, so we have the ability to bring people in.
I can't do that next year, though. I can't do that to open up a pod. I don't have that many people in patrol.
Rather than get into how we're going to manage the jail and run the jail at this meeting, and get into next Tuesday's debates on amendments and what's going to happen, I think we will cut that off right here,
Sure.
right now, because that we're now getting into budget amendments for the coming year, and that's a different meeting.
But just for clarification, I think I understand, it was an increase in 400, not a decrease. An increase in revenues, correct, Dave? That's what you're telling me?
Hey, it's always in a particular line, so the, jail corrections revenues, do you want the exact count numbers? You have to give me a few seconds here.
Just so I have an understanding, because the media was asking the same thing and it said decrease. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, it's that, is it an increase or a decrease? It's the old mill rate question. Does that mean it's a decrease in my taxes or not? So.
Sheriff, my understanding is the proposal would be an increase in revenues to your department.
Okay. That's what I needed. As long as you guys are on the same page, that's all I need.
But if I'm recalling correctly, and again, I said it wasn't a code, if we're going to increase revenues in one spot, we're going to have a decrease of expenses elsewhere, correct?
No, the source of the revenues,
I'm sorry, added.
the total revenues will come from it's going to come from a different source. Instead of levy support, it's going to come via revenue. So there's no need to change expenses.
Okay, perfect.
Well, yes and no. You're increasing revenues, which means that to balance the budget, let me rephrase that. You're increasing revenues in the sheriff department, or that's the proposal. That means that you either have to decrease revenues elsewhere or increase expenses elsewhere to keep the balanced budget. So to use a different example, Supervisor Buchenberger could say, I'm going to increase the revenue in the sheriff's department by $400,000 for jail boarding, and I am going to increase the number of Beanie Babies that we purchased for the finance department by $400,000. That balances the budget.
So it's 471,800, which is federal boarding, would be increased, and then in $411,100, which is property tax revenue, would be decreased. Net is the same on the revenue
Right.
side.
In the sheriff's
To
department.
keep the sheriff department budget
Correct.
flat.
The rest of the adjustments don't impact the sheriff.
Thank you.
I think that is the end of that topic. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
We're going to squeeze it.
That's what we're at.
Start looking over my shoulder. We will go back to to the agenda then, back to the order we were in and go to child support. And I will apologize, when I reviewed the minutes. The first one, exciting news. I will try to stop in the future. That's kind of very general. Didn't give a very good topic and I missed that. We'll carry on this time with it, but we need some more detail and what exciting news is in the future, or not just your department, but other ones too, and we'll look at also. So.
I
My
apologize, I
mistake.
guess I wanted to keep you in suspense, because it
Yeah.
was, I wanted to share it with you in person.
It's my mistake, so.
No, sorry about that. So, would you like me to, can you hear me okay, or would you like me to go forward? or-
I can hear you all right. I don't know about any audio equipment that has to pick it up. We're all, okay. Go right ahead.
Everybody else okay? Okay. So this, in the end of October, we had our annual fall conference. The Wisconsin Child Support Association puts on a fall conference every year. At that conference, it's an opportunity to obviously learn different areas of topics that, you know, all the different child support agencies are dealing with. So at every conference, there is also an awards banquet. They take nominations for different things. Worker of the Year, State Worker of the Year, County of the Year, many other things. This year I nominated Dodge County for County of the Year, and we won this year. So that's exciting news that I wanted to share with you. Dodge County has never won this award before, so it's just something very cool to get in our line of work. It's just great to be recognized for the work we do. I'm really proud of the staff. Over the last year, we've encountered lots of changes, so I think this is very well deserved, so I just wanted to let you know that we won County of the Year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Also attached the performance updates. Again, our fiscal year runs October through September. So I just wanted to give you an update of what our year-end numbers were. So the attachment that I had just went through where we are for fiscal year 2021 ending in September. I didn't have these numbers at our last meeting, so that's why I'm providing them now. We increased in arrears collection, as you can see, so we've met 3 out of the 4 benchmarks, so I think we're really improving, and I'm hopeful that we can meet all 4. It's a tough task, but I really hope we can make that. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right. So then the next topic was that we are taking calls back in our agency effective Monday, so November 1st that started. So we no longer are using the call center. All calls are coming through our office. Still trying to work through the kinks a little bit. It's going to be, you know, a fluid process that we're kind of, but I think we are doing quite well so far. So I also, with the staffing update, we are looking to hire that additional position. We have held interviews. I've offered a position, however, they do have to pass the IRS background checks for our office, so that's where we're at right now, so we haven't gotten that back. Just that IRS audit recap, I had.
If we can just
No
drop
problem.
back that,
Yeah.
does that mean we're providing 24/7 in-house coverage?
It is not 24/7. It is our business hours, 8 to 4:30, line is open, you know, they can reach our office.
Okay.
After that, they could leave a voicemail, and then that would be returned the following business day.
Okay, so then after hours, there isn't actual, I can contact someone and get emergency help or whatever the call may be about.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you know, with the building closed, with the courts closed, there's really nothing that we could probably, you know, handle outside of the business hours. You know, an emergency for anything in our department is normally if there's like a warrant out for somebody and they want to get somebody out of jail. You know, that's something we can only do during business hours anyway,
Okay, good,
so.
thank you.
But yes, they always have the ability to leave a message.
I think we have a question.
Yeah.
So, from the public's perspective, this has been a pain point for quite a long time. I think it's been, we had that call center for maybe 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, I forget exactly how long it was. But the public really had issues contacting that Milwaukee call center. They weren't getting information that they needed, and ultimately, most of the calls ended up getting routed back to the county anyway. So I think this is a good move. Hopefully it'll work out for you guys, but as far as satisfaction of our county residents and getting answers that they need regarding child support, I can tell you that the call center was not a great option.
Thank you, Judge.
I would agree, and I think moving forward, I'm hoping we can provide better customer service to
It wasn't
participants.
personalized enough. They could answer general questions on where to send your payment, that was about it. If you wanted specific questions about how much arrears I have, or, why is this particular charge on my statement, they could not answer those questions.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, they were supposed to be, but they had so much turnover as well that it was just, it wasn't a good option anymore.
Right. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Just that IRS Audit Recap, I just sent a memo last month's meeting, so I just didn't know if there was any follow-up. All went very well. Had lots of cooperation with other departments here in the county, so it helped move along that process. So I just didn't know if anybody had any questions on that. Then, just another update. In December, our agency, along with Washington County, is going to pilot the integration of CCAP e-filing, that system, with our document generation system, which is called wKIDS. But so we will be, piloting that and trying to figure that out for the other counties that will then join in that process in March of next year. So that's just something that we will be working on as well. That's all I have for you.
Any questions?
So, I do. Sorry. So that integration, is that meaning that for CCAP is going to be able to see the kids' information?
No, I don't believe for CCAP use, like for you and like clerk of courts, I don't think it's any different. It's just when we're in our system, we'll be able to generate a document and then upload right away without having to log into CCAP. That's a good question.
Sorry for interrupting.
Any others? Thank you. And again, congratulations on your reward. I hope you let your staff know how pleased we are.
Thank you. Will do.
Now we'll head on to 6A with the sheriff, and if I remember correctly, this is our second attempt on the resolution we sent back to you, Sheriff, to tweak a little bit to bring this board and the authorizing entity, if we get permission from the entire board, county board, on contract. With that little review, I'll turn it over to you.
Right, that's the, I went to Kim and I conveyed what your desire was at the last meeting, and she transitioned the resolution over into this. There's one note in here that statute does give the authority to the sheriff to contract with towns. So towns is not in here, it's just cities and villages that fall under Kim's analysis. The cities and villages would fall under the purview of the county board, and the towns fall under the purview of the sheriff. So towns is not in this resolution, and we don't have any towns right now that are looking that way anyway. But otherwise, I believe what we have in the resolution is what was requested last month.
And I had one question that was brought to me, I didn't have an answer. If we contract with someone, and I take it, it's for a year at a time, 2 years at a time.
2 years, yeah. Yep.
And halfway through, they decided, we don't want this, it's not working, we're done, we want out of it. Are they liable for the expenses for the contract they signed for 2 years? Or is there, for lack of a legal term, an escape clause?
Yeah, there's a dissolution clause in there, and I can't recall what we've got in the working drafts, but there is a dissolution there. If we were to cease services, the expenses would mostly be wages, which under the current approval for the positions that we've asked for Teresa, for example, when the contract is gone, those positions no longer exist.
So can we terminate that employee, or would they just be absorbed in, or how would that?
We certainly would try to absorb them in somehow, but if we didn't have the authorized positions, it would end up being a layoff.
Okay, I guess that was answered my question.
Yeah.
So we would, if the contract dissolved, we would not be on the hook for any additional expenses because of it.
Right, and that's all going to be laid out in terms of contracts when we get to actually starting to look at the contracts themselves. But as I remember the dissolution clauses, that yes, that is the case, and certainly we are having Corp Counsel review them. Actually, they're reviewing it right now, one of the first drafts, and that's certainly something that they would be interested in making sure as well.
I'm hoping it's addressed, because if it would dissolve, I don't want the county to have extra expenses because we didn't have a way to get out of it.
Sure. And I think that discussion is when we actually bring the contracts forward. I don't think it's really related to the resolution here of how we move forward with the process. But certainly that's something that we're doing our best to make sure that that any of these contracts are going to be expenses and revenues, and they should offset.
That answers the question in mind.
Yeah.
Are we going to go, is there anything else, or is it on our shoulders?
I think we discussed it last month, and I just made those changes you asked for last month. I don't think we need to rehash what we talked about last month unless you have questions.
Everyone got a copy of the resolution, I believe, in their packet. Are there any questions on the new resolution?
I just have a comment, but go ahead, Tom.
Wait. My question is, you're gonna have 2 employees additional, right, for this? Are we having 2 cars or 1?
We're working that out with the village yet.
Okay.
We haven't figured out all those details, so I can't really give you answers. Again, that's a contract question. We're not done and ready to provide answers for you on that.
And if this, like you said, it does fall apart, what happens to the car? Do you put it into your pool as a spare backup vehicle or something like that? Or does it go to the village?
Again, these are all contract questions, not really related to the resolution, so I don't want to get too in-depth. Those are things that we need to work out with the village, the villages, or whoever we're contracting with, whether it's going to be their car, our car, I can't really answer those for you at this point. When we bring a contract forward to you, that would be the time we could answer some of those questions, but right now, everything is in a state of flux as far as where are we going to end up yet.
Thank you.
And the resolution does say that it's all coming back to us anyhow when you get a contract.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Supervisor Cooper?
yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tom. So the only, the changes that we requested last month are here that I see. The only thing I asked Kim about this as well is the notification, being in the annual report. And I had said, I think it would be more helpful to have that timely, at least to your JPP. So any changes to contracts or cancellations and things like that, that we should be informed of those changes and here, and not wait until the annual report to know that something may have changed. Yeah, so.
That makes sense.
So, I mean, there will be some language in there just to make sure that it's coming back here.
So we're going to add language to it, or?
Yeah, probably be by way of amendment or something, but.
We're going to do that here, or are you going to wait for the county board to do that?
I briefed this with Kim, and she said that makes sense, but, and we could make.
What are you saying?
If you read the.
It's on the top of the second page.
Top of the second page, yeah.
You say instead of county board, just come to judicial.
Well, so in order to inform the whole county board, you put an annual report together, March, April, right?
Yeah.
And the way this is worded is that's how the rest of the county board would be informed that something's happening. All I'm saying is, if well, obviously, if we're approving the contract, we'll know what's happening. But if there's changes to the contract or modifications or cancellations or something like that, just changes to the contract should be presented here. That's what I'm saying.
That would be an approval of the contract though, so I think it would have to come back here. We couldn't make a change to the contract without coming back here, because that would be a new contract.
But if it was canceled, just changes and cancellations, we should just be informed.
That'd be great if we could do if we're gonna do an amendment, get it done here, that we've got a final.
Yep.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with it, that if there's going to be a change or an amendment or something with the contract, we need to know about it, especially if we're going to be the authorizing entity.
Yeah.
Is it another way of doing it rather than have to go through another month with a?
Well, it doesn't have to be another month, but we just.
Can we just make contracts a standing agenda item for every month?
Sure.
Of this committee, and it does the same thing.
Yep, that'd be perfect.
And does that, somebody help me, does that have to be a motion? That we make it a standing, or we just make it one?
You're the chairman, you just put it in there.
But as a legal, I mean, not be so that it could
Well, I understand.
change.
Yeah.
So if if we did a motion,
Oh, we can always fix this later too. We can always fix it later.
well, that
That's a problem.
solve the
Yeah,
situation for
Yeah.
us. I like that better, because then, irregardless of whether there's a change or not, we're getting an update. At least we're being told status is the same.
yeah.
So,
One thing would be, yeah,
yeah, we will go that way. If you'd like to make that in the minutes, that
we will
might be the way to go.
review any contracts on a monthly basis.
Yeah, we'll just have a standing agenda item, contract update.
Contract update is perfect. And if there is no changes, there's no need to talk.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions or concerns on the revision as it stands?
No, it looks good. I'll make a motion to approve this resolution as presented.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution that we are talking about with contracts. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
So I just have a question. So, when do you foresee, whatever contract you have Kim reviewing right now, when do you see that coming to us then? Next month?
I'm hopeful for December, yes.
Okay.
That's the village of Breesville, because they are ready to move forward next year. So I have to wait for Kim and Dave to finish their analysis before getting back with them, and then hopefully next month we can have something for you.
That's pending the approval of this resolution.
That would be, so just so everybody has an understanding, this will not show Tuesday, obviously, at our meeting. This will have to come to the December county board meeting for final approval. And if I bring a contract to you in December for approval, it would be approval pending the final approval of this resolution, if that makes sense. Kind of a process there.
It does.
But you'll have to if you were to approve a contract next month, you would have to approve it pending the approval of resolution, whatever number this gets.
Okay, I think I got it.
How many municipalities are you looking at right now?
Right now, there are 2.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, our next meeting date is December 3rd.
And it's right out there.
Yeah. It'll look at your agenda as to whether it's here or across the street, because thank goodness someone told me yesterday it was here, I would have been over there. Yeah. So I'll look at the agenda when it comes out as to where we will be. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.